Welcome to hashtag 52 Needs, and this week we are talking about freedom. And I have with me Sally Thibault, who is let me read this because there's a lot, a transformational wellness and accountability coach, a professional speaker and counselor, an author of 3 books, an emotional freedom technique practitioner, also known as EFT, and master trainer. And she's a Facebook Live host, show host, as well as 20 other radio stations around Australia. So welcome, Sally. It's great to see you.
Oh, thanks for having me again, Angela.
Okay, so freedom at work. What comes to mind when you hear those words? Does that actually go?
Yeah, look, it can be really difficult to find that freedom. Depending on what industry you're in, I think it's very challenging sometimes. You know, I've done both. I've had my own business for many years. I've worked in education for many years. I've worked in corporate for a number of years, and now I have my own business. Mm-hmm. And, you know, freedom is one of those things that you sometimes, depending where you're working, you have to create it in your head, you know, about because you always have choice.
Yes.
You always have choice. Mm.
Yeah. I was just thinking what was the book that was written by, I'll think about it. Let me just move along and then it'll come back. But there was a book that was written about freedom in the heads by somebody who, the father of logopedy. God.
What's his name? You're talking about Man's Search of Meaning?
Yes.
Yes, Man's Search of Meaning.
Yeah. So there's this book,
Viktor Frankl.
Viktor Frankl. Man's Search for Meaning, and he talks about the freedom he had in his head that nobody could take away from him.
That's exactly
and he
right.
was in extreme circumstances in a concentration camp. But we don't think that we have a lot of freedom at work when we actually I think we have more than we think we do.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I worked, in education, and it's a very constraining, I liken it to a bit of a triangular box. You know, there's somebody at the top and I was down the bottom. And there were so many times in that I loved my role. I was in educational marketing, absolutely loved it. It did give me the freedom to move around, but I was very restricted in what I could actually do sometimes. I always had to answer to somebody else. But I found ways around it. You know, I found ways around, I used to say to somebody, I spent an enormous amount of time having people think that my ideas were theirs. I would I'd come up with an idea, think, okay, now how am I going to get him to think it's his idea? And it was part of the game, really. I always got what I wanted. I loved what I did, and I loved the people that I worked with. I especially loved the children. It was just a phenomenal career of 10 years. But it was really interesting, you know, you talk about freedom at work, and I think sometimes we also don't recognize that we get trapped in believing we don't have freedom. I think for me, when I look back on that time, I loved the work, but I really was enticed by the benefits, you know, the holiday pay, the sick pay, the superannuation, all that stuff, which kept me there long past the time I should have left. And I recognized, though, that at that time, my value was security. So even though there was, looking back on our little freedom, I was able to satisfy that freedom in other ways. Yeah. As far as I wrote a book during that time. You know, I get up and go for a walk every morning out. We had a beautiful park area and that was sort of the freedom. I still had freedom to choose who I was going to associate with and talk to at work. Yeah. So those were the smaller freedoms. And I think, you know, there's a time and place for everything, but to think you have no freedom in a job, I think that's again a bit victimish. That's a victimhood statement. Because in Viktor Frankl's book, he talks about, you know, that what I believe and my choices I make in my mind are my choices. I don't know. And everything about work, I think, looking at freedom is how you choose to see situations.
Yes.
You know, if somebody's driving you crazy and you feel you have no freedom, What's your role in that?
Mm.
Why are they triggering you? Because that's like a cell you place around yourself when you think that everything's about somebody else.
Well, my experience is that when I work with people in leadership roles or with people who report to people in leadership roles, that there's often this sense of, from the leadership position, there can be this, I have to be in control. I have to make sure that everybody is doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the person who's reporting to them doesn't feel that they have a lot of choice or a lot of freedom. But when we start looking at it, it's about saying, what you may not have freedom in the way you exactly do the things you want them to do. So it's not being the rebellious child and wandering off and going, I'm doing it my way. But if you're creating some guidelines and you give a person autonomy within those guidelines to say, you don't have to go from A to B in the route that I have prescribed, but you will still have to go from A to B, but you have choice in how you go about it.
Yes.
So there's still leeway. That autonomy is really important, because that motivation to find that expression of who I am in that contributes to a company's success. And not that, but personal satisfaction, all of those things that are so important and that are more meaningful to people than payment often.
Yes. Oh, I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. When that sense of accomplishment and that sense of achievement within a framework, there's you work for a corporation and they have guidelines. Sure. But if you have a leader that gives you autonomy within that to achieve whatever. It's funny because when you just said about going A to B in a different way, it's like learning maths in school. It's like when they make you, it wasn't necessarily they got the right answer, but how you got there they were more important, more worried about it. That never made sense to me, because everybody views things differently. I remember you had, and so sometimes we carry that old stuff that, it's got to be done my way because, well, that's the way I was taught. There's a certain way to do things.
Yeah.
A beautiful thing about bringing freedom into the workplace is that if you allow employees freedom to come up with ideas, which is a lot of the big companies do, Google, Buffer, I'm thinking about some of the other big name companies that allow their staff to be very creative. I remember, I can't remember who it was, one of the big tech guys said, we love to break things. Mm-hmm. But we love to break things. Yeah. And I think right now, that's what we need to be looking at. How are we going to break this old way of doing things and reconstruct something brand new? Yeah. I remember when my son went for his job interview for a big YouTube company in Canada, and he could see where the company was going wrong. So he applied for a certain job and knew that wasn't the job. So then he wrote this long email to them describing where he felt the company should go, and they hired him like that. And when we met his boss, he said they called him the Maverick. He was the one that allowed the company to pivot and go in a totally another different direction. And a lot of that is about, well, number one, a good leader who could recognize. As he said, I wanted to get him off the street before he went and worked for our opposition. And two, the confidence that he had. My son had to say, "You're not doing this right. I can see something far greater." And I think that's what this time is all about.
But people don't necessarily. We're in a place now where it's getting harder and harder to speak up.
Yes.
I mean, we have the right to expression. There's a whole human rights declaration with over 30 unalienable rights that have been declared. But we are chopping away at those quite considerably at the moment. And I'm really grateful when people do speak up. I mean, yes. I always say when people, say, oh, I just want to be good. And I go, well, no, I want you to be better. I want you to, and you're not going to get there by form-fitting yourself and shape-shifting yourself into something that somebody else has prescribed for you. You've got to find your own shape. And that's not something somebody can show you. You can give guidelines. Freedom of expression is then you decide who you want to be. And again, the world we live in, and we've talked about this before, during COVID, that has been fairly restricted, but we have lots of choices.
Yeah. We have to be very careful. And I know, as you're saying that, I'm thinking back to my time when I was working in education. I know there was a time when I felt that the company or the place that I worked provided me with the security, and that I was fearful of stepping out of that security.
Yeah.
So, and now I recognize, looking back 11 years later, is that you create your own reality wherever you go anyway. Yeah. And this fear that we have, we can't do something within an organization, you have to, I think, step back and go, is this the right place for me to be at this time?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean walking in tomorrow and handing your resignation. That means taking some time to be introspective about, is this a right fit for me? What do I really want?
Yeah.
Because there are great companies and organizations out there that really love innovation and freedom in a sense. And so it's like bringing your personal freedom to your position and saying, am I trapping myself here? You know, and I have a cousin of mine who works in a large government organization. She's very good at what she does. But she recognized the organization wasn't giving her the freedom. So she makes jewelry and sells it in farmers markets on the weekend, is doing just incredibly creative work that she's done. Yeah. She still has her job, but to find that freedom and creativity, she's created a side hustle.
Yeah. But the important thing is the recognition that work can't be everything. I have a client at the moment. When we looked at, the wheel of life, that, where does she find satisfaction? The only places she found satisfaction were in working and in making money. And there were all these other areas around creativity, relationships, friendships, traveling, learning, and all of that weren't going anywhere. And she was like, okay, I need to quit my job. And I said, well, what if your job is not the only thing that provides you with meaning? You have freedom to express yourself in all sorts of other areas. Why don't you go and do that? So she's doing all sorts of things at the moment. It's hard learning, because if you spend your whole life just going, this is the one meaningful thing in my life where I can express myself with freedom. And the thing is, there's not much freedom at the moment for her.
No.
So I'm like, that's okay.
Yeah.
Just treat it as a job. You've got a great opportunity. You don't have to go and find a new job and learn it all over again. You know this job. Find meaning and find freedom outside of work. So true. She's doing all sorts of stuff. I sent her a list of all sorts of things that she could do, and she went, that's quite a list. And I'm like, that's just the beginning of the choices you have.
That's right. And because you've got to also remember with, Maslow's hierarchy theory, it's very hard to feel free when you can't pay the rent and you haven't got can't put food on the table, you don't know where the electricity bill's going to be paid. That's very hard to find freedom so those are the things that you have to be handled. But as you said, within those confines of a job, I don't think I have freedom. Here's a whole heap of other ways. And then that permeates. You become more confident with that freedom.
Yeah. And I still think that you can express your creativity even if you don't have a lot of money, or if there's not security. I mean, the starving artist is an example for that. I always have to remember that Maslow wrote these needs in 1943, when the world was not at its best place. But then I also remember places like Japan and Fukushima, where people helped each other. They came up with new systems during the tsunami, and when the power plant blew up. They came up with all sorts of amazing ideas. And I think we have, as you said, we are the sovereign beings. We can think for ourselves, and it's about recognizing that we can do that. And it's that belief, that self-belief that really helps.
One of the greatest things that ever gave me that sense of freedom was, I have no plan B.
Yeah.
There is no plan B. And it was when I recognized I'm not going to, because I would always, when I started my own business, I always had a plan B. I can always go back. I've always got the door half open.
Yeah.
And when I decided no plan B, wow. Just as you said, like the creativity opened up, the intention opened up, the focus opened up. Because while you've always got that plan B, it's always an out. well, it didn't work. I'll go back to what, you know.
Yeah.
So that gave me freedom to be more creative, more focused, more energized when I recognized there was no plan B.
Mm. Okay, so we've got choices. We can stay in the job and just say, you know, that's the job I know and I'm expressing myself outside. Or we can just go, I'll just quit my job and I'll see where it takes me and fulfill, like your friend who's doing jewelry, and fulfill myself in a different way that I've always wanted to. Again, lots of choices, lots of freedoms, and yeah, and at work especially. So my invitation for everybody would be, have a look at how much freedom you actually have. Chances are there is much more than you think you do. The problem is, or not the problem, but the important thing is standing up for that and looking and negotiating that, and not just going into victim mode and saying, oh, this is just too hard and I just have to bear the load and just go with it. So
I'm thinking of mea culpa, sackcloth and ashes when you're saying that.
yes.
Like, woe is me. Like, we're
Yes.
not a victim. We never
No.
are. Yeah,
Speak up
exactly.
to people. Leaders want to talk to you. And if they don't want to talk to you, well, then educate them in wanting to talk to you. All sorts of ways of doing
And, you know,
that.
that's the thing. And I don't know how many women will be on this call, but women tend to do that. Oh, I'm not going to rock the boat, or I'm not going to ask for more money, or I'm not going to ask for the raise. Oh, I can't do that. That will make me feel like I'm a pushy bitch. And yet, when you feel comfortable in your own sense of who you are, it's a conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just a conversation.
Yeah. And then freedom comes with no fear.
Or some fear, and just jump over it anyway.
Yeah, and do it anyways. Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much, Sally. This has been a great conversation. It's definitely given me lots of food for thought, and I hope everybody else as well. So thank you, and thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you next week.
Bye for now.